sun has just gone down. We are in Earth eclipse. That looks like it's a wave, isn't it? And it looks as if the waves are moving away from the land. Going out to sea. Now that's huge, that's several hundred yards. Wave rebounding off the rocks? No. Notice how the waves just seem to just appear. These waves are not of the water. These waves are a result of the wind. What you're watching is the wind coming off the coastline and hitting the sea and proceeding out over sea. So what you're watching are like the wind fronts, kind of like clumps of air, like boulders of air rolling down the hillside and hitting the sea. This is what you feel, or you can hear probably in this recording. Occasionally you get a bluster of wind. You know how it feels. When the wind suddenly just kind of like comes from nowhere. Well, there are these fronts. There are these waves, like what we're seeing in the sea, but in 3 dimensions. So you can actually feel these boulders of air. And of course, more like currents. Is it like currents? So what we're watching there is the air. And notice how it maintains its form and shape as it's going across the sea surface. There is structure to these air patterns, as there is structure to wave patterns. And of course, this is just the visible result of it on the surface of the sea. And of course, in the air, yeah, those are the visible effects of wind. The shape of that specific cloud is because the air has that, the wind has that shape. So, like seeing the wind in the trees. You don't know where the wind is until you see it in the trees. Well, in the same way, that cloud formation is because of the wind. Specific movement of the wind in that area. Astounding. Astounding. Now that's what we're trying to produce. We're trying to produce some kind of modelling system that shows the social movement. Each of these little particles is just like us, and we're being moved along through memes, if you want to call them that, or any kind of social effect, force of any kind. And we are just being played along those. We kind of make some kind of choices, but really we're just like a surfer on the sea wave. It's just minimal the amount of control you've got. You can just about control yourself, but there's certainly no way you're actually influencing the direction of the wave. And we wish to produce something that actually does produce it does actually alter the wave. That's what we need to do. We need to exhibit such control of ourselves that we can work in conjunction and cooperatively in such a way that we can actually change the direction of a wave that is moving through us. Memes, bundles of memes, V-memes, whatever you want to call them. Do we get what we're saying here? It's starting to look like a little bit of a warrior there. Head, just going off to the left hand side, his top shoulder on the left, his body angling, he's kind of looking down. It's like a giant, dissolving. That's what we have to see. We have to actually see a social body. Now, I came up with a Jack's track, and I think it's called One Hell of a Titan or something. And I suggested that if 1,000 people act together cooperatively in such a manner to produce a social effect, that would be a little cloud. that little cloud would hopefully have an effect, i.e. it could rain and you could actually feel it. So people could actually witness what the effect of 1,000 people is. And it has to be within like a day or maybe a week at maximum. 1,000 people manifesting, I call that a titan. Manifests, does something, and dissolves. Titan. And of course, people might be playing around with 10, 100. What about eventually we could play with 100,000 of us playing this game, and 1,000,000 of us cooperatively come together in such a form to produce a social body which exists through time. Lives, breathes, dies. I'm actually imagining something after 2020 which has a cyclicity of 20 years, about a generation. So if you're kind of lucky, depending on how science develops, but if you're kind of just lucky, you just live for like 80 years, that means you'll live 4 cycles. You might be born at the beginning of a cycle, or you might be born at the middle of a cycle at its maximum, when it's really healthy and full and vibrant, almost like the harvest time. Or you might be born as in the winter time, when we're actually not doing a huge amount of creativity and so on and so forth. So you get what I'm saying? So we have these kinds of cycles that we create in time, socially, lasting 20 years, sustainably, globally, yeah, for all of us. That's what I was imagining. So that's kind of like a social body that exists for 20 years. But we do want to see an end to it, so that the next generation, or when you're 23, or maybe when you're 43, or when you're 63, you get to participate at a different aspect of the cycle, at a different age. How marvellous to see what the next cycle will produce. And then when you're 63, how marvellous to look back and remember what the first cycle produced, and you were actually present. There might be recordings of it, but to be actually present and part of this social existence, the specific art forms that develop and evolve, the specific branches of science or whatever, and how it contributed to some, I don't know, big social invention, a kind of global culture, the first global culture, and then it kind of dies, and then it comes up with another one. But it has to have sufficient depth to it that it's not like fashion, which happens in seasons. It's like a 20-year cycle. It's got quite a lot of depth to it. You can have various religious leaders that rise and then just kind of fall away. All with a periodicity, like a wave. So we all agreeing that it's all going to die. It's not like it just keeps on peaking. Like now, where somebody's popular, or somebody's doing something fashionable, or somebody's producing new pop music, or whatever it is at different times, which means there's constantly getting these kind of waves of people. No, we're all agreeing to be part of a big social wave. It'll last for 20 years. So it's sustainable. But the most interesting thing are those waves, seeing the wind. Water has got some very interesting structures. It seems that they kind of form little clumps or clusters, whether in tetrahedrons, which is the most common pattern, but you get like icosahedrons, and even larger kind of clumps of water. Not like waves, they just kind of settle in these positions. So for example, just looking at a glass of water, a still glass of water has these kind of clumps or structure that embedded within it. And by adding a chemical or two, or an ion or something or other, it actually alters these. And if we start being really clever about things, we might be able to learn how to manipulate the structure of water. In order to improve our health and so on and so forth, for example. This is new stuff. We might be able to discover this in the next 10 years. I mean, it's already existing in our bodies. Our bodies, for example, capillaries and so on and so forth. The water distribution in our bodies between cells, it's just remarkable. The structure of the water allows certain chemical transferences between cells. That's outrageous. Synapse. I don't quite know. People have explained various things about synapse in the brain, but actually, nobody's ever made the connection with water in the brain and how much water you require, and where's the water when you look at axons and when you look at synapses. Where's the water? How much water is there involved? All these ions flicking about, but where's the water? What structure is the water? Because that might be medically interesting.